That's what I'm panel discussion with our secret weapon, Dan Gross, as well as several successful K awardees, whom I will introduce in a moment. There will be four. One is on service, and so he'll be just a little bit late. He is on his way. So today's title is Lessons Learned from the K Application Process, What I Wish I Knew Then That I Know Now. And I think that anytime we go through an arduous process like that, once you're done, you know you could immediately do a better job. And you wish that it was maybe, if you were going to have to resubmit, you wish it was the next day because you're all timed and ready to go. So that's what we'll hopefully get from panel discussion today. Before we go to that, though, a couple of housekeeping things. Many of you know who've been to K Club Board, we crave your feedback. We really want to know what you liked about today's session, what you would like to see in the future. This is all done for your benefit, so we really want to get your input and ideas for what you want to be given in future K Clubs and how we can hit that sweet spot of the most useful information conveyed in the most interesting way. So you respond to our survey, our anonymous survey, but yet also write your name down. I'll enter you into a Crown Royal bag to win in order to get this in K Club mug. So today, Janet is on.
Oh, very excited. Full disclosure, no one gave me any keys or anything before this. There is
Whitney Rice. Is she here? She usually sits remotely. All right, well, Whitney, thank you so much for your always helpful feedback, and you won the K Club Month today, so we will get that to Whitney. A couple of other things we like to just, before we get started, if there's anything of particular relevance and potential interest to you, I want to just make sure you all know about. That's the Building Interdisciplinary Research Careers in Women's Health K-12, as well as the Georgia CTSA KL2 program. So deadline's right around the corner. Hopefully you're planning to apply. You've got a really good application in hand and are just working on getting all the finishing touches to all the documentation on that. So those are coming up, as well as the Georgia CTSA TL1 program, which is more geared towards earlier career stage, both pre- and postdoctoral fellows. These are all wonderful intramural careers, or they're extramurally funded, but they're internal competitions for these very coveted slots. They're great programs. So I'm going to move along to introducing today's esteemed panel. So many of us, or hopefully all of us, Janet Gross, who is the Grantee Consultant and Course Director for the Emory MSCR Grant and Scientific Writing class. She is the fearless leader of the K tutorials that are offered 3 times a year that are just kind of a crash course in everything K and what you need to know for K awards. She's worked with many people who have submitted successful Ks at Emory, including all the 4 people on our panel today. Speaking for our panelists, I'm going to skip over Raul for just a moment because he's the one running a little bit behind. Jonathan Kim, and Jonathan, there you go. He is the Chief of Sports Cardiology, Department of Medicine. He is also the recipient of a K-23 from NHLBI. You can see the title of his K-23 on the screen there. I also just learned he just submitted for his art application, so he is wasting no time. He's on the ball. McKay on the end is an Associate Director of the Neuromechanics Laboratory and an Assistant Professor in the BME department. He has K-25 funding from NICHD, which I'm sure he'll tell us a little bit more about when in the course of discussions. It must be a K for engineers, is that right?
Exactly, yeah.
And then Soumitri Sil is Assistant Professor of Pediatrics and a Pediatric Psychologist in Aflac Cancer and Blood Disorder Center at Children's Hospital Atlanta, Department of Pediatrics, and she has K-23 funding from NHLBI as well. And she's had an interesting journey in terms of getting her K, and I think everyone on the panel will be able to talk about sort of the road of hard knocks that they went through to get where they are today. I was hoping if I took a little time for the introduction, Raul Badell would show up. He will. I'm sure he's on his way. But he is also the recipient of a K, but a K-08 funding from NAAD. He's Assistant Professor in Surgery and part of the Emory Transplant Center. And when he comes in, he will be sitting on the end. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Janet to facilitate. And
Oh, yeah, I'll use the microphone. So, I'm going to, is it good? Can you hear me? No, can't. No, can you hear me? I'm going to stay here just because we can have a conversation. And for those of you who've been to the K Clubs before, you know we want this to be interactive. If you have any question in your mind, and even if you think it's embarrassing and that it'll make you sound like, you know, you didn't do homework, whatever, please, please, please ask us. Be the guinea pig. All these people have been incredible guinea pigs, and then up here they're going to tell their stories, so this is going to be like a share session. So, yeah, ask questions. I've got some kind of just talking points, things that'll prompt discussion, but feel free, we can take the conversation and discussion anywhere you want to go. We've got some really good here. So the first question I wanted to bring up to pose to the panel is the whole issue of ambitiousness. It comes up a lot when reviewers criticize your research plan as being overly ambitious, or, heaven forbid, the inverse, under-ambitious or unfocused or diffuse. How did y'all plan your aims? What was the process you went through to kind of capture what's enough work to do for 5 years? What's enough work to do in a mentored environment? What can I currently do myself on my own? But then if I could do everything on my own, it wouldn't be a K. So how do I strike that balance of, I want to do X, but I need training to get there, and it's enough work for 5 years? We can just go down.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think what the challenges are, maybe all have unique stories, and kind of as it relates towards coming up with the research question. And so for me, it was coming up or feeding off of some preliminary work that I had done with an older mentor, and then the clinical fellow come up with kind of a unique aspect for some of the things that we had previously looked at as it relates towards athletes' hearts, and building off of kind of prior data. And so that's very nice as it relates towards kind of the ambition of the plan, because it just made sense on paper in terms of, this is what we've done, this is a new way to look at this. I have a mentor here at Emory who has that area of expertise that hasn't been looked at athletes in this case, and it was a simple question to look at, while also kind of combining in the career development plan, which is probably the most important part of putting together your K. So that was very helpful for me, rather than kind of just coming up with a new question and maybe getting a little bit, as Janet was saying, over-ambitious. So.
So I think similarly for me, the approach that I took is I considered, like, what's the ideal, like, research path that I want, like, what do I want to look like? And for me, like, I knew very strongly that I wanted to be, like, a behavioral interventionist, and I wanted to do clinical trials, and, like, this was kind of in my long term, like, that was the person that I wanted to become. And so then I kind of thought about what are the steps that I need in the interim to help me get there, and the gaps that I have currently that I identified. So similarly, taking a similar approach to Jonathan in terms of looking at the preliminary data that I had of some of the pilot funding that I had, and kind of where that was taking me, and then what I needed to do in the middle to then kind of meet my ideal of what I wanted, is how I started to piece those together. I will say that there was a lot of back and forth between the research plan and the training plan, like a lot. Because as you think about, it's really difficult because you want to think about them concurrently, because your training plan has to map so closely to your research plan, that as you like start to change and adapt one thing, you also have to try to make similar changes to the other. So that was probably the one piece that I found to be like, felt like an initial barrier. Like, it felt difficult to start on either one because neither plan felt fully fleshed out yet. But I think as you start working on one piece that you know that you feel confident about, then the others start to kind of come together a little bit more. At least that was how it happened. That's how it happened for me. I would say the one other thing that was also really helpful was, and I hear this a lot in lots of other K clubs, but I did read a lot of other applications, of other K-23s, others from psychologists, of others of physicians, just to try to get a sense of what is the scope of things that people plan and then get funded. And I found that to actually be very helpful. Even if I didn't fully understand everything that they were doing in their study, it helped me gain a sense of kind of the mix of things that they incorporated in their training plan, as well as kind of like the timeline to think about with each research aim and the components. So I found that to be really helpful.
I would say that the reading successful pay applications is one of the most important things. You do, I pick one thing. I was used to working on R level applications, like a lot of them, and the AIMS page has got to be completely different. So if you're used to working on R applications with a primary mentor of some kind, the product is going to be completely different. If you write it like an R, it's going to get tanked.
I think your mic went out.
Okay. If you write it like an R, I think it's pretty likely that it's going to get tanked. It's going to be overambitious. And so, you guys are mostly physicians, I'm guessing? Mixed. Okay, so I'm an engineer, and in the engineering department, and on the research side of the engineering department, and I'm a translational researcher. So my objective for the K Award was to actually change as little as possible from the stuff that had already been done, and to, for the first time, to a long-term follow-up in this patient population. None of the work I was involved with ever did sort of balance follow-up on people to produce outcomes. And that ended up being kind of a cheap thing, resource-wise, that you could do, but it was still very novel. So I would, when you try, the strategy to work for me was not rock the boat of scientific knowledge, but to add something really new that you can do, but you know, I mean, do that all the time. Everybody does all of it, not new. So if you can find something new to add that you can do within the constraints of the budget for one of these things. Typically, 25K or 30K a year. There's not much you can do with that, but it is possible. So I would try and think small and out.
Add one thing as well, one new thing, but also just to agree, which I didn't say, which is definitely the reading of other applications. That's huge, and they're easy to get a hold of. And some of the boilerplate stuff, obviously, you want to see what other people do because everybody writes the same stuff in general relative to your field. But just to get a sense of writing style, ideas about how you're going to, again, the craftsmanship, the grantsmanship is huge. And so that leads to my point, which is, I know this isn't a plug for Janet per se, but something that I learned that even just as early as just putting on paper is how much of this is really an art. And having somebody who knows how to write grants, knows how grants reviewers read grants is very different. My two mentors, one from here and one not from here, and while both of them have been funded multiple times, several arts, et cetera, just kind of getting Janet's kind of insight in terms of how she tore up the first drafts of it and made me think about things that I frankly would never in a million years ever think of, no matter how many other Ks I would read, was just, and can't overstate enough. So we're really lucky to have that. I don't know how many other Janets are out there, but it's definitely a benefit that we have here. So that was a huge part as it relates towards kind of ensuring that the science I was writing wasn't too ambitious. So again, I mean, Janet's not a sports cardiologist, but she was able to read my grant and actually get a sense about what reviewers can. There's no other sports cardiologists that are probably reading the stuff I was trying to submit and actually kind of saying, what are you talking about here? What does this mean? What does that mean? You should write it this way. And that was extremely helpful.
Thank you very much. One other point I want to make, and I frequently ask writers the beginning of their writing process in terms of the ambitiousness issue is to make a 5-year plan, to actually literally pencil and paper make a 12 months a year, 5 years. What are you going to do? If you're proposing a 500-patient study with 2, 3, and 4-year follow-up. You know, what does the rolling wave of patient involvement look like over 5 years for that kind of project? So lots of times your science is like way ahead of your logistics and your kind of feasibility capability, and then I'll see what the 5-year plan looks like, and I'll say, you have $25,000. How can you do this? So it's just like keeping these balls in the air all the time of budget, logistics, research design, kind of longitudinal plan. Lots of people are proposing prospective longitudinal data collection. It doesn't matter what the topic is. So, you know, you guys all had very similar research design. Different to me what the science was. It was, is this a feasible plan? Because if you propose a plan that's not feasible, or a plan that, you know, in the 11th month of the 5th year, I'm going to collect the last patient to follow up, something invariably is going to trip you up, and you're going to be outside the 5-year window, and you're not going to get that data, and then you won't meet your sample size. So those kinds of just very kind of practical, can you actually carry this out? So that's like a logistic issue on ambitiousness. How about scientific ambitiousness? So Lucas was saying a little bit like he didn't think maybe his plan was as ambitious as he wanted it to be, and I thought your 2 plans were highly ambitious in terms of data you hope to capture. I think when Lucas said that he, because of his prior training, the perfect match for the K, the purpose of this K-25 is to train people with quantitative science background, engineering, chemistry, mathematics, to do clinical research. So the perfect match, and that's why his plan, it was okay that he's reflecting on it as being scientifically not that ambitious, because the new training was tremendous for him. Two of you already had the clinical research training, but the scientific aids had to be very ambitious in terms of what was the yield, what was the overall impact. So depending on who you are, what your training plan is, what your background is, and what the K wants, you have to convert. So we're working right now with people who are, there's a new K99R00 and HLBI for blood science. Really unique K. There's only one other like it. And the instructions are very, very specific about what they want and what they want to do. Their Ks are going to be completely different. Okay, any questions about that, about kind of identifying how you strike that balance? Lots of people are really driven by their mentors to be super ambitious and make it look like an R. How did you all deal with that? I know sometimes I gave you all feedback that didn't exactly jive with the mentor's feedback. How do you do this? I would say the 2 of you. How did that go?
Well, just to kind of, maybe not necessarily answering that specific question, but just one other kind of piece of this is there's obviously a lot of strategy that goes into the questions you come up with and ultimately how you put it together. And we're all that's heard that saying, you know, the best grant that you write is one where you've almost already finished the project. And so that definitely helps with the ambition as well. Whenever you've already had, and hopefully you've had this luck, but, and I imagine a lot of people do, I mean, when you put together a grant, most likely you've got some data that have already started addressing the question that you're asking. It's just it hasn't necessarily been, you know, published or out there in the literature, and so that's really important as well. And so some of the questions that we put in this grant, we'd already almost answered the question. We just hadn't obviously, you know, published a ton on it yet, or just thinking again about the next question, which is going to be the grant after the K that was submitted. And so I think that's also very important as well. To combat the question of kind of conflicting, it was a little bit challenging. I was in a unique spot where I came down here with a mentor who was highly experienced and who I had kind of much of what I wanted to be after him, and he was up in Boston. And then I picked a new mentor because I think it's probably more to get into now is how you pick mentors. But obviously it's a big red flag if your primary mentor isn't at your institution. And so we had to be very strategic about finding a new mentor that fit with the science. Understanding that the mentor here was a vascular biologist in some regard. My mentor was a sports cardiologist. There was a little bit of kind of some challenges that relates to putting it all down on paper and kind of hearing what some people would say was important versus what the other person was saying. And yeah, that can be a challenge. I mean, there's no perfect way to deal with that outside of kind of hearing both sides and putting together what makes most sense and ultimately what you think is going to be best for your specific grant, because these guys are ultimately going to, they're all about supporting you. I mean, they're getting nothing out of this outside of saying they have a K-Mentee. It's not like they're getting money for this, and so they want you to succeed. And so hopefully it's not a situation where somebody is completely just, in disagreement, not wanting to come from the other side or saying you should do things when the person is not. And you can typically find a happy medium.
I would certainly agree with that. One of my primary co-mentors has a long trajectory of R's and U's and clinical trials. And so I think it is trying to find that middle ground of, I think, writing style and finding the appropriate aims that fit with what you want to do and with what still aligns within the realm of like what your mentor can offer and provide, because I think you still want to showcase all of that expertise that the mentor is bringing to the table, but also still identify yourself as like a unique individual within that, so that you're not just a clone of your mentor. And so I think those discussions and those kind of compromises, I think, happen along the way, and I think as you talk more and more about it, at least in my scenario, I think that is kind of how it came to find this middle ground of here's the feedback that I'm getting from you, and here's the feedback that I'm getting from Janet, and how can I put this and make this make sense? And it was through those kind of thoughtful discussions that like finding that compromise in the middle actually worked out really well.
Did you ever have the three of you meet? Did you ever meet with Janet?
We didn't meet with Janet. No, that would have been a good idea.
You were the conduit.
I was the conduit, yeah, probably not. Yeah, next time do that. Probably be more
We've done that on
productive.
occasion, have you? Yeah, on occasion.
I would say that, like, the feedback from a mentor on the research plan is a really, that's a complicated area, right? Because, as was discussed, you have this mini-me syndrome thing. I mean, you got to be very frank in your discussions with your mentor about differentiating yourself in your career from what you have. Otherwise, if you write a mini-R, then no one wants to fund. So, for me, I had a basic science mentor that I was postdocing with. I was working on Parkinson's disease, and she had no experience in Parkinson's pretty much. So I find two new clinical mentors who really worked on Parkinson's. And in an early version of my K award, I had all three of them as mentors. I had the Ames page to my program officer. By the way, get to know your program officer. And he said, you can't have her as a mentor. This is ridiculous. So, and really, I mean, they were very frank about it. So she ended up being on the grant as, a consultant. She wasn't actually on the grant. And I think for me, getting what ended up to be a new basic science mentor who was really all about Parkinson's disease, who didn't have any skin in the game of my research, and a clinical mentor who was the director of Movement Disorder Center, who actually worked on the project with me, I think was a really good fit. And so I think those are often fun conversations to have, but if you're thinking about it, then your mentor is definitely thinking about it, so you might as well talk about it. Right.
So to make one final point on this topic, the consistent theme across what everyone's saying is that they all have what sounds like high level of access to very high quality.
Mm-hmm.
And these are people who have been funded. So there's, to me, that really speaks volumes, and it's a good to have, and you need to know when you do have that and make most of it. And obviously they all work in a very mutually beneficial, mutually respectful way with people who are very generous with their time and also help facilitate. So that's, I just want to point that out as a theme. Okay, look at the next slide. Yeah.
A quick question. Sure. So some of you guys propose studies where you would be doing some prospective enrollment. So that kind of study is the idea that you already have a prospective study ongoing to show feasibility and then you propose it? Or is it that when you get the grant, then you will start and then discuss the feasibility and everything planned out before you mentor, but the study is not ongoing? How do you take you go about that?
That's a really tricky question. I'm glad you raised that. Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So one of my primary aims is a longitudinal prospective study. Yeah, sorry. The question was, when you're proposing prospective research, how do you go about showcasing the feasibility of that? Do you need to have started that already and demonstrate the feasibility of continuing that? Or if you're going to start it, like, how do you kind of showcase that you'll be able to do it? And so I think that, for me, some of the preliminary work that I had done was really integral in that, to showcase that I could do it. So I had some ongoing research where I had some follow-up data on a cohort of patients that I had recruited with a difficult-to-recruit population. So I think showing the engagement and retention rates of those early studies was really helpful to showcase, like, I can do this. But in the actual study that I proposed, we would be starting new once I got the grant, and it wasn't necessarily a continuation of what I was doing previously. But that may differ.
So sometimes proposing a highly ambitious prospective study is not feasible. You can afford it. So it really depends. Can you actually pull it off? So you had prospective data collection.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of similar, actually, which is that you have already collected some prospective data to show feasibility, and then the question that's asked is kind of the next logical question as it relates to scientific reasoning. So to be specific, for us it was showing blood pressure rise in football players that didn't seem physiologic and probably more pathologic. So then taking into account a mentor's expertise in vascular biology, arterial stiffening as an independent cardiovascular risk factor, do we see arterial stiffening of football players? And so it's really the summary statement of this whole K project. And so building off of the fact that we had already had data from my mentor, but then showing feasibility that I had collected some data on some Georgia Tech football players down here, showing what we had already showed up there. So now we're able to ask the next question. So then, the reviewers see that and like, oh, okay, so yeah, this is a new question. We're not just kind of doing, and my old mentor had no expertise in this, so there was kind of the new kind of learning about obtaining vascular, some of these vascular biologic measurements, and a new question. So
I would say, if you don't have any data, there's a lot of when a reviewer reads it, one thing they look for is it going to work, or is it going to be a spectacular failure? And one of the things that makes a failure is that you can't get patient. And I think it's a really easy thing to find. So reviewers will always look at your sample size and look at your retention plan. And now, by the way, the rules for NIH are new. You have to express it explicitly. You have to have a recruitment and retention plan that are separate from the main body of the document. So everybody is very, very concerned about it because NIH has been giving money, and people they're not able to do it. So, but reviewers on the flip side, they are trying to support you. They see new young candidates, and they're excited about supporting your career. So you can put information in there about the resources that exist around here, whether it's AVRC, or all the resources for recruitment and grading, and if you can talk to those people and get letters from them that you can attach to a grant saying that they expect that your recruitment plan will be feasible, that goes a long way, even if you haven't done it yourself already. So I would, you ask them 6 months beforehand, and you have to write the draft of the letter yourself. But that helps a lot. So think about that in terms of establishing the feasibility of your work, so that the reviewers read it and they don't have like a misgivings about your ability to get the patient. Right.
I think about a lot when I see the first proposal of the research design. Is prospective design the best way to answer the question? Or can you do a retrospective study that will give you a good enough answer to the question you're asking? While prospective studies are really exciting and everyone aspires to being able to carry that out, especially if you want to become an expert in clinical research, a lot of times your question can be answered very sufficiently with retrospective data collection, which is significantly easier to do, much more feasible, much less expensive. And you need to demonstrate you don't have to propose retention plans, et cetera, et cetera. So that's often the first question I'll ask if I see be a very complicated research design. You have to use this design to answer the question. Okay, let's go to the second slide, which is about mentors. Is the right number of mentors? How can consultants and collaborators be used effectively? And how frequently should the mentor team and the entire team meet? And a lot of this is not necessarily in the planning of the grant, because I actually don't even like when people refer to what they do when they were planning the writing of the grant, because that really can't be substantiated. You say, I was my mentor every day, 8 hours a day for the past 6 months. I mean, and I think, well, yes, that's fine. So I really don't like to hear about what you've done in the writing of the grant. So let's talk about what's in the proposed grant plan and how that information gets substantiated.
Let's start this time. Good.
Yeah, I think on mine, there's 2 mentors, and we propose to meet formally once a month, and they're both clinical people, and the people reviewing the grant, most of them are in my study section, were clinical people, so they imagine the possibility of meeting this famous neurologist once a month, whether that's going to be possible. I mean, they're very smart people leading a grant, and they have a keen detector for. But so I had 2 that really worked for me. One thing that was really useful is I had one guy who knows the game on my grant, but he's really a career mentor and a basic science sort of resource. And the other mentor works with patients exclusively and actually put effort towards the grant. And that is really, that if you can figure out a way that there's actually, my mentor Stewart, he scores unit parts and disease rating scales from video, and for the grant. He does it all for clinical trials and stuff. But we proposed that, and for him, that small but very specific piece of work he's got to do with the grant now guarantees that he's an author on the papers that come out and things like that. So putting concrete things in there for that sort of person that you're trying to work with more closely, I think is really useful. Then we had consultants and collaborators that I work with much more closely from the day-to-day operations of data collection. And I think for this kind of thing, that's a little easier than what you do with the mentors, because you would be doing that already. So you really have to make a place to meet with the mentors. And for me, I have to give a report once a year. Since I was a L2 fellow, I have to meet with Dr. Blumberg, who was here recently. I have to meet with him, once a year and explain how many times we met. And so that's a good sort of piece of feedback to have. You will also, if your K gets funded, have to report that kind of thing to the agency once a year if you want to get year 2 of the grant and things like that. And depending on who your program officer is, they may or may not look at that pretty closely to ensure that you are delivering what you said you were going to do. So that is not, I've always heard that's very uncommon on our awards, because my program officer reads my progress report pretty carefully every year, and if he doesn't like something, he emails me and asks me to put in more detail. So depending on who your program officer is, you may get, oversight. So be sure when you have a meeting with your mentors, you record it somewhere, because you're going to have to report the number of times you met.
So my primary mentor certainly changed from my initial submission to my resubmission. And that was for a lot of different reasons. Primarily it was initially driven by which mentor had funding at the time of my initial submission versus which mentor had the content expertise that I needed. But for my resubmission, I ended up with 2 primary co-mentors. My psychologist, one really needed to be a behavioral scientist, and the other was then a medical physician with sickle cell disease, which is the population of my research focuses on. And so I was really able to sell that team as a package because I needed both elements and both sides. It was a little bit tricky because there was no behavioral science expert in team management, which is the work that I do at Emory. So I was one of the few that really had to sell having a primary co-mentor who wasn't based at Emory but is at Georgia State, but fortunately had like staff privileges at Children's, so I was really able to sell that tie-in to make it seem less like this is an out of institution person. But that balance for me was really important and was identified by my reviewers as something that was really needed and important. And so I wouldn't say that I have a primary mentor per se, although maybe I do because one has like much more than the other, but both are providing really integral science and scientific mentorship. And then I have an advisory committee of about 5 collaborators, and they each are supporting me in very specific, ways, whether it's qualitative methods or implementation science. And so in that plan, I was really specific. I can't meet with 7 people every week because then I don't have any time to do any research. But to be specific, like I'll meet with these collaborators like once a month when my project is active and is really pulling in and that need for that expertise, but I may not need them or their help in year like 4 and 5 when I'm not doing that qualitative aspect. So it was really specific about the time duration of when I would be drawing in these different collaborators. I definitely got feedback in my response from reviewers that I had proposed too many meetings, and they're like, don't meet with your mentor so often so that you can grow some more independence. And so I, proposed meeting with my primary co-mentors, meet with each of them once a month, and then I meet with both of them together. So I end up having kind of 3 mentor meetings for the month. And that way they both know what the other thing, and we're kind of all on the same page, so then I can go to them separately for kind of the specific content that they can offer me mentorship in. I think that has ended up working for me pretty well, and then our whole team comes together about once a year, usually around the time that our progress report is due, so that I can just update everybody about what has happened thus far. So even those who aren't actively engaged in whatever piece of the project that I'm doing that year are still in the loop about kind of how everything else has progressed.
So I think I'm a really good example of strategy with the mentorship team here. So the thing that was unique with me was really my primary mentor is not at Emory, and that was always going to be kind of the big kind of issue up front for this, and I suspect I'm not the only one where you come from another place and you have a passion that's really at another center, and you're trying to grow it at a new place. So I had 2 primary mentors, but who was listed as my primary mentor was really not my primary mentor. So kind of the dirty secret that depending on how you describe things. And really kind of the 2 areas of expertise for both these 2 individuals were so far removed from each other that it was really helpful as it relates to kind of how I met with them and what I discussed with them. In some ways, the have never met together at the same time. It's always been kind of separate because both of them the kind of insight into what I'm doing are very unique for their specific role in the project. And really my primary mentor, who's in Boston, is the person that I've met with the most. And he and I have had a relationship going back years. So you meet at the least once a month. We probably talk more than that, but that's kind of what was built into the grant. And so I'd say that's probably one key thing whenever you do this and you come up with a unique kind of mentorship plan that may not be exactly as billed, is that whoever this primary mentor is at the other side really has to be a devoted primary mentor, because it's not going to work if it's somebody who helped you, but they're really not going to talk to you maybe once every 6 months, and they're not going to build time, versus if and you can clearly kind of build that into the grant that you're going to have these distinct meetings. And then as for who my quote-unquote primary mentor was, he and I are on the same hall in terms of office space, and so it's obviously we see each other much more than once a month. So kind of unique in terms of how it's built, but I think it also shows that you can be very kind of savvy in terms of how you put together a K as towards what you're trying to develop on your own, and who the mentors that are going to get you there, like what their role should be, and ultimately how you develop things. So.
Ready to chime in?
Sure.
left baseline, so I don't know that I need the microphone. So, pardon my tardiness.
Early, you gotta see in there, because there's participants.
Oh, yes, okay, pardon. Okay. So, we're addressing the issue of mentors. I guess these are the questions, right, mentors? So, my I think was maybe a little more conventional, or at least I would put it. Janet, has better perspective, but I've been at Emory for some time, and so I trained here as a resident. I had my fellowship, and I did my postdoc research fellowship and all that work here, and then I transitioned onto the faculty and so forth, and so that was much of that was intentional because I had such an interest in developing a research program, and so I wanted to continue to use all the momentum I had generated over that period of time in the same specialty and so forth to my advantage. And so I have my mentors. I have a three-mentor team. I have one primary mentor and two co-mentors, and they're very natural extensions of how I had evolved. I guess maybe a concern was, have I worked with them already too much, or is it not different enough than what I already was doing in terms of it being status quo? I think I used we figured out it worked out okay, but I think that was a concern at first because these are folks that are in my immediate division. We actually have offices that neighbor each other, and so we use that to our advantage. And then I think the approach from our end was that while these are people that I'm accustomed with, use that as a strength as far as being vested and having laid down a lot of the groundwork already and working relationships, and then use the difference in science as sort of the approaches to how they could help me. And so today I did a lot of my postdoc work was in non-human primate work, and then I was transitioning. I had already transitioned, but I was transitioning to mouse models, and so I used the mentor team, and sort of novelty of that to leverage, sort of novelty to picking them as my mentors, and so. Consulting collaborators. I also had 3 collaborators, and then I'm in the middle of my second year of the award, and so it's what you pose and what you do are a little different, as with anything with and so forth. But I regularly see overlap, clinically work with, and scientifically work with my primary mentor team, with the exception of one. So I don't have as many formal meetings with them. I did propose them because it needs to be clear, I think, but there's not really that much of a need for me. And then as far as the whole collective group, I'm actually due with mentors and collaborators. I certainly have 3 pretty well established collaborators in the institution that supported my application, and I'm actually proposed definitely scheduled meetings with them, and then I'm actually, practically speaking, I'm actually due for a meeting with the whole group. And then so anyway, I think I covered those in general. So
That's thanks.
I have one thing.
Go ahead.
You need, I don't know what is the right number, but you need at least one who is experienced with study section membership and a lot of NIH grants, and is far along enough that you're not in competition with them once you finish the K. So you can get a really senior person who really understands how NIH works. That makes the thing seem much more convincing.
It's a really good thing. I'll just add to that, we generally don't recommend that you have a primary mentor that is an assistant professor level.
Right.
That you want to have a mentor team who are established, they're secure in their job, they preferably have a good funding track record. The resources that the mentors have to help support your work does not have to come from NIH money. It can come from anywhere. So money's money, but it has to be there. And this person can't be in the last year of their R01 with no known next grant. Okay? So all those kind of medical issues have to be covered. We have a question over here, yeah.
Especially if you're a PhD scientist. I'm surprised when you apply for a position, it's normal to have mentors, because it seems like you're applying for a K award, you're still mentored, but you're even if you're a professor. I thought that there was more
Independent. Yeah. So the question is, when you become an assistant professor, is it typical that you have a mentorship team in place? How would you begin to apply for a K award as an assistant professor and pull together a mentorship team? So I think that varies department to department in terms of what the expectations are when you come in. That's been my experience. There's a lot across departments in terms of what people are expected to have or bring to the table in their new faculty positions. It sounds like you already had established mentor arrangements set up as you began your assistant professor position. Makes sense. I mean, you want to?
Pretty much online, yeah.
I mean, these were
Soumitri spent some time establishing those, no?
So, so when I had come into my appointment, I think because as being a psychologist coming into a medical division, there were no senior psychologists already in my division. So it takes some work to be able to find the right fit. So there was a clear medical physician who is one of my current mentors who is like the perfect fit in terms of content, but in terms of like the behavioral sciences aspect, that was still something that was, I needed to find something. And that's where it kind of took some reaching into the field of other people to be able to see how to bring that together. And now I have a phenomenal collaborative relationship with my other mentor, George C. That all three of us are actually working on a lot of other projects together. So it has actually become a pretty productive group.
I would say, I think most of these people who get these things have been working on it for a long time. I think that maybe gets a little under the rug, but I mean, I spent 5 years getting my mentoring team together, and I don't think that's atypical. However, like my friend Svetlana, she's in neurology, she moved the K Award from here to here from UCSF, and her new chair was able to find her some sort of replacement mentors who were great at this. But I think among us, it's definitely, if you really like the work, you're going to be working on it for a while, and you're going to be working on that team for a long time.
Just one last thing too, aside from the mentors, it's the collaborators and the people who might end up being the consultants. Like, I think those relationships definitely take some time to figure out, even if someone is doing something similar to what you might need, when you meet with them, want to work with them. So I think, so that does take some time and some effort to kind of figure out who's going to help provide the best package for what you need. So I do feel like I met with a lot of people like others had given me recommendations, like, oh, so-and-so's doing work in this and this, and they were all elements of what I might need. But trying to find the right person in terms of who seemed interested and invested, and who I would potentially want to work with, like that definitely took some time navigation.
okay. And yeah, one more.
Just really quick about collaboration. Y'all have spoken a lot about individual people who are consultants and collaborators. I was wondering if you could speak to organizational collaborators. So I do a lot of community-based research and receive funding from my community partners. And I was wondering if y'all have any experience with, like, I don't know, just letters of support from those organizations, or maybe what that looks like for y'all.
So let me just repeat the question. Collaborators that are community organizations rather than individuals.
Yeah, I can say quickly that for one piece of my project is an intervention development piece, and I had proposed to kind of set up like a community partnership or an advisory group using some of the individuals that work through our Sickle Cell Foundation in Atlanta. And so I had not previously known them before, but through other people who had worked with them, I was able to meet with them and did get a letter to be able to add to the application saying that they would kind of support these different avenues of
just one point, just kind of disappearance maybe point. The K wants things to be clean. We just want to look at names of people and consultants who are typically, that could be either here or elsewhere, people with areas of expertise in a content area that where you aspire to train. Collaborators in executing your research is a different story. So working consultants and collaborators at a level of mentoring. You always definitely need to substantiate and support any collaboration you're going to get from any community-based organization to execute your research. Okay? But I think everyone on the team has a consultant or collaborator that is an expert in a certain area that, you know, helps with the analysis of this, or do this kind of amount, or the assay in there. So for instance, a lot of people, especially the basic science people, will use a lot of the Emory core facilities. And would want to take advantage of the core director, who's a faculty member, who is going to facilitate your training in that core to get that work done there. That would be an example of a collaborator who is a faculty member who is in charge of a core. Does that make sense? I see definitely your distinction. You want both. You want creation from community-based organizations to execute your research, and then you want consultants and collaborators in specific scientific content areas.
There are 2 sections on the application.
Right, for all that. There's plenty of room to show all that. So let's see, we have 7 minutes. I'll go to the next slide, and then we'll just end when we run out of time. Okay. Lucas, you seem to have a lot of thoughts about this, communicating with the program officer. Lots of people find this intimidating, and I had other faculty members suggest that maybe I was intimating that this was an undue level of conversation or familiarity. So I just want to make sure that this is an accepted procedure. It's published by the NIH. Please call us. I have all documented proof that it's totally appropriate. If you were a PI who's, you know, my generation or older, people who were in the NIH were MBAs. All they cared about was how you were spending the money. So no reason to call them unless you wanted a no-cost extension or you wanted to do something different with your money. These days, everyone connects with the program officer at some level. Do you want to share some?
I would. So my K gets put through, gets funded through NICHD and CMRR, which is a sub-institute of an institute interested in a very specific area of research. Their own K panel. So when I submitted my grant, it went to a special review panel that institute holds. And I think a lot of institutes do this now. And generally, there'll be a program officer for the whole stuff, and there's a program officer specifically for training. And they will want to meet. And so you can email them and ask them, do you have any time to talk this week? I want to run some ideas by you and see if you think it'd be a good fit for something fun. And their job is to give out money, and they want to give it out to, you know, the best people, and you guys. So I would really encourage you to do that. There are a lot. It is a little intimidating, but get over it, you know. It's stuck.
Yeah, I would just say that this whole idea of this is what would you do differently, and that is something I did not do, and in some ways I feel like, you know, I could have made it a little bit clearer myself, perhaps, about kind of getting some insight. It obviously worked out, so I'm lucky, but I had very little interaction. In fact, almost no interaction up until probably the end whenever I was asking some more logistic questions. But I just submitted my first R, and I can tell you early on I was reaching out, and I'd sent them my specific aims, a draft, just to get a sense about, does it seem like something that, again, you're obviously not saying, or, you know, you're very tactful in your wording, but does this fit with the mission? Is this something that would be of interest? Just to kind of get some insight. Am I wasting my time? Do I need to completely change this up? And they're very helpful. So yes, I would definitely say the answer to this question is yes.
Okay. Any questions about that from the audience? Yeah.
I can't find the program officer on there. I find it when I was applying for a S2. Is there like a page I go to, or I'm not?
And I'll tell you how to do that. Calculate. Yeah. The table of so jargony, it's like doing your taxes. From table of IC, which means Institute Center, dash, specific, contact. And in the very top of the first page is program announcement. But after this, I'll show you that.
How far in advance did you contact them? Approximately June?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
So a few months.
yeah.
In advance, did you contact the program officer?
Well, specifically, I mentioned that I gave my program officer an early version of the AIMS page, and he suggested to change the mentoring team. And so I think, these people read a lot of business, and so they know what it looks like when it's a really early grant, and you don't have to worry about aspects of that, but you want to start a rapport with them, see what gets them excited, and they'll frankly tell you what they think it is. And go with it. So I would say for June, mine, much like Jonathan said, he says, email me an AIMS page and we can talk about it. That's just sort of.
Never really too soon. You can that process at the NIH are what I'll call the consumer-facing part of the institute, and their job is to find you and talk to you and cultivate you and help you create this application. So if you send them an early draft, say, hey, this is an early draft. Also, I strongly recommend you include a really great little bio sketch, completely cleaned up, really nice introductory personal statement, and ask you a question. Don't just say, can you look at this for me? Ask them very specifically, does this match with the mission of the Institute? Is this the kind of thing, the research you see people proposing 4K awards? Do you think this is feasible? What do you think of my science? Blah, blah, blah. Also, you might want to do some homework by reading on Reporter other people's abstracts or similar kinds of Ks like yours, so that you can tell you are phrasing the depth of their science. Most people do include their aims in their abstracts, which is, you can read their abstracts on Reporter. Just put their Reporter and it'll pop right up. You can see what their science looks like. So it's good to kind of educate yourself before you send an email. Another thing to do is if your PI has R grant, and you ask your PI to with their program officer and get that person's impression of the aims and if it's appropriate and who in the McKay system might you connect with. I use that strategy every now and then. So for in the interest of time, we'll not get any more slides, but we'll be happy to take any more questions that are going to be. And if you want to ask, yes, go ahead.
I was wondering if any of you had challenges with distinguishing between I am an excellent fundable candidate and also I need this additional training and I need a mentorship grant, and how to address that.
That's the great UK.
Exactly.
I'm a great candidate and I know how to do X, Y, Z and I have great publications and I'm really an aspiring academic researcher, but I need more training to do. And then my big question to you is to do what? So K is about what you're already great at, that's an R. If it's about the next step, which is what I think I've been talking about, how do you articulate that? So the kind of the catch-22 in writing the research plan is that you write with authority about something you're not an expert in. And that's the really hard part. And the reason the grant looks so good and these guys have gotten funded is because their mentors help them shape that. So asking questions that they're not expert in, but they had a really good presentation, reflect very well on the system that they're going to do the K in. So that's the whole circle come around. So you have to have that question that you pose. I'm a great qualified candidate, but I want to take it to the next level, and this is the next level. So that's we call kind of a catch-22. It makes it difficult.
Well, I'm not you, but I wish we had another hour, but sadly we don't, so please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you all. And I just want to put a plug in for next month. We have a really exciting session on enhancing rigor and transparency to enhance feasibility, and Kevin Whiteley from Georgia Tech will be our special guest speaker. Thank you all. Remember to answer the survey, please.
I got a quick question. Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you too. Good luck with your